Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you once again, our distinguished delegates. Thank you to our delegates in the room who've taken up your seats. Thank you for honoring time. Our delegates that might still be in the exhibition hall or outside in the foyer, kindly make your way back inside the venue. We would like to start. It is 3 p.m. We have a few more, I think 2 more sessions for the afternoon with a few more speeches that needs to be delivered. And we would like to ensure that we get full round value from all those contributions. So thank you so much for making your way back to the venue. May I call on the rest of our delegates to kindly take their seats as well. They can hear me outside, I believe. Kindly make your way back inside the venue and let's start promptly. We kindly call on our delegates to please make their way back inside the venue. We kindly call on all our executive delegates. Please do take your seats. We would like to commence with our afternoon program. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our final call for you to please take your seats. Our final call for you to please take your seats. To our delegates out in the foyer, kindly make your way inside. We are ready to proceed with the rest of the afternoon's program. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention for just a moment? This is a gentle but important appeal from your MC today. And I know that the room is not fully filled yet as we wish it to be, but it's important that I get this message across. We have an exceptionally rich program with distinguished speakers and speakers who have really taken their time and all their energy and effort and their expertise to share that with us today. And in all fairness to our speakers and everyone, our delegates themselves, I think it is just fair that we respect time. 5 or 10 minutes late, it doesn't sound significant, but it impacts the rest of the program. And it certainly impacts the energy of our speakers. And I really don't want to sound like that teacher who reprimands the room, but it really is very frustrating when we give a time and we ask kindly that you take your seats or be back in the venue at the allocated time, and there is no respect for that. I am pleading, when your neighbor returns, please, on my behalf, convey the message. Maybe you'll do it in a nicer, kinder way. And I'm really trying to keep my smile, but I realize that it's gone down. I'll try harder. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, distinguished delegates. For also honoring that and engaging with sometimes old friends even and new acquaintances. This morning we officially opened the Namibia Oil and Gas Conference and Exhibition 2026 with and under the auspices of the Vice President of the Republic of Namibia. We heard from government, we heard from industry, international partners, and national leadership. The message was clear. Namibia is no longer simply an emerging exploration destination. The focus is increasingly shifting towards development, investment, execution, and of course, delivering lasting value for the people of Namibia. This afternoon's program continues that conversation. To set the scene for this afternoon's executive leadership discussions, it now gives me great pleasure to welcome back a representative from the Office of the President. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Deputy Head of the Upstream Petroleum Unit in the Office of the President of the Republic of Namibia, Mr. Carlo McLeod, who will provide an important strategic update on developments within Namibia's upstream petroleum sector. Let's give him a warm welcome applause. Carlo, I'm so sorry that the room is so noisy.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, esteemed industry leaders, representatives of international partners, colleagues from government, NAMCOR, and the wider petroleum sector, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a privilege for me to address you under the theme of today, which is Partnering for First Oil. As you all know by now, Namibia has reached a point where Discovery is no longer the only measure of success. However, what we need to measure now is delivery and the success of delivering it very well. For many years, the conversation around Namibia's petroleum sector was understandably dominated by exploration, the geology, the basin potential, the wells being drilled, the possibility of significant discoveries. But today, the conversation has slightly changed. We are moving from discussions on exploration and discovery to development, field execution, infrastructure, finance, local content, contractors, services, and ultimately, the big one, first oil. That transition is very significant because finding petroleum is one challenge. Developing it commercially, safely, efficiently, and in a manner that creates lasting value for Namibia is an entirely different challenge. And that is why the word partnering in today's theme matters. First oil will not be delivered by government alone, obviously not. It will not be delivered by an operator alone, or an EPC contractor, or a subsea company, financial institution, our own NAMCOR, or Namibian businesses acting independently. But it will be delivered by a system of partnership that are aligned around one objective: converting petroleum resources into producing assets and ultimately into sustainable national value. The transition from discovery to development changes the nature of the question that we must ask. During exploration, we ask, is the resources there? And a lot of people, even within my own circle, has actually doubted, does Namibia have oil? How large might it be? Can it be technically developed? But when we move forward towards development, the questions now become more demanding. Can the project be commercially viable? Can the regulatory framework support timely execution? Can financing be secured? Can infrastructure, drilling, subsea, floating facilities, logistics, and supply chain requirements be coordinated? Can we develop the required skills as Namibia? Can Namibian companies participate meaningfully? Can government institutions make decisions within the time frame where major capital projects are required? Those are the questions. And perhaps most importantly, can all these components move together? Because First Oil is not just one project. It is a system of interdependent projects, decisions, institutions, people, and investments. A delay in one part of that system can become a delay for the entire development. That is why partnerships cannot simply mean that stakeholders attend the same meetings. It must mean that we understand how our individual decisions affect the collective delivery objective of attaining first oil. Let me be specific of what each partner in this system carries. Government's responsibility is to provide an appropriate policy and regulatory environment, regulatory certainty, efficient decision-making, institutional coordination, and a framework that allows investment while protecting the national interest. But government cannot carry the development of the petroleum sector by itself, as I've mentioned before. Secondly, operators must make commercially responsible investment decisions, execute projects efficiently, manage the risk, develop people and suppliers, and engage meaningfully with Namibia's institutions and the private sector. Thirdly, contractors and service companies are the companies that design, that engineer, that fabricate, that install, drill, supply, maintain, and operate the infrastructure required for first oil. They are not secondary participants, but they are part of the delivery architect, and they must look beyond individual contracts to help build a capable Namibian supply base. Fourthly, financial institutions, and here I also refer to the insurance industry. They are partners too. A technically sound project cannot become a producing project without the appropriate capital and the financing structures suited for an emerging petroleum province like Namibia. And then we have NAMCOR that has a very equally important role to play as well. Namibia's national petroleum company and a central participant in the development of our upstream petroleum sector. Then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Namibian businesses that have perhaps the most important long-term role of all, because our objectives cannot simply be to produce the first barrel of oil. Our objective must be to ensure that the production of that first barrel begins a process which Namibia develops enduring industrial capability, which means preparing now to compete at the standard that the international petroleum industry and the projects require. Namibia needs a model where stakeholders understand the entire value chain and the dependencies within it. If a development requires specialized skills, we must identify those skills early. If a major procurement package will be required, Namibian businesses must have the visibility early enough for them to prepare. If international contractors are entering Namibia, we should ask how their presence can also build local capacity. If government approval is required for a critical project decision, the regulatory process must be coordinated enough to avoid unnecessary uncertainty. Therefore, the objective is for different interests to align towards the successful delivery of this project or projects. That is what genuine partnership looks like. And it is what I would describe as our first oil ecosystem. Each institution accepting responsibility for the part of the system it controls, while understanding the consequences of the parts that it does so. The conference program rightly places considerable emphasis on local suppliers, SMEs, contractors, and future generations. That is the right conversation. But the next step is connecting it directly to project execution. A Namibian company does not participate in a major offshore project merely because we want it to be. It must have the required technical capability. It must meet the international standards. It must have access to finance, and it must have competent people. It must also understand the procurement requirements and be able to deliver safely, competitively, and reliably. This is where international partnerships matters. International companies bring technology, they bring their experience, they bring their capital, they bring also the global standards, as well as the international and specialized capabilities. Namibian companies, on the other hand, bring local knowledge, their presence, their relationships, and the opportunity to build enduring domestic capability. The objective, therefore, is not to separate international and Namibian businesses, but to create partnerships in which international participation helps build Namibian capability. That is how local content becomes sustainable for us in Namibia. However, we should be honest about the consequences of getting this wrong. Large petroleum developments are capital intensive and very complex. Time, uncertainty, and coordination all matters, and every unnecessary delay can have consequences beyond the issues that caused it. A regulatory delay can affect procurement. A procurement delay can affect construction. A construction delay can affect financing. A financing delay can affect the investment decision. A series of individually manageable delays can affect the timing of first oil itself. That is why partnerships must be accompanied by discipline, identifying problems early, communicating openly with one another, making decisions, respecting the different responsibilities of our institutions, and resolving disagreements through structured engagements rather than letting them become barriers to delivery. Government will not always agree with industry or always share an operator's perspective. Contractors will have different commercial priorities from what the regulator is requiring. That is normal. Partnership does not mean the absence of disagreement. It means having the maturity and the institutional mechanisms to resolve disagreement without losing sight of the bigger or the larger objective. We must also avoid defining success too narrowly. If Namibia reaches first oil, but remains dependent on external skills, services, technology, and supply chains for the majority of the value created by the sector, we will have achieved production without achieving the full developmental opportunity. Therefore, first oil must be the beginning of a deeper technical capability, stronger Namibian companies, new careers and specialized skills, stronger infrastructure, and greater participation in regional and international energy markets. Ultimately, a broader economic transformation. That is why the discussions across the conference matters. That is precisely the ecosystem that we need to build for Namibia. Namibia has an opportunity, a huge opportunity before it. But opportunities do not become outcomes simply because they exist. They become outcomes through decisions, investments, capabilities, cooperation, execution, and most importantly, trust between the partners. So as we speak about partnering for first oil, or I would encourage us to make a more demanding question: what must each of us do to make first oil happen? What must the government do better? What must operators do faster? What must Namibian businesses do to become investment and project ready? What skills must we develop now, rather than after the projects have commenced? These are not theoretical questions. They are questions of execution, and the time for execution is now. Let me conclude with 4 simple statements. Discovery creates potential. Investment creates projects. Partnerships creates execution. And execution creates first oil. But for Namibia, first oil must ultimately create something much larger than the first barrel. It must create national capability and value. That is the standard against which we should judge ourselves, and not simply whether the oil is flowing, but whether when it does, Namibia is stronger, more capable, more competitive, and better positioned for the generations that follow. I look forward to the discussions that follows this keynote, because the panel brings together precisely the range of perspectives required to confront this challenge. International contractors, operators, Namibian industry, government, and NAMCOR's legal and regulatory leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, let us make First Oil not merely a target, but a shared national delivery project. And let us ensure that when Namibia reaches First Oil, we can say that we do not simply produce petroleum, but that we have built an industry for everlasting. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Carlo McLeod, for once again providing valuable strategic insight into Namibia's evolving petroleum landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, the journey from exploration success to first oil is one of the most significant and complex transitions any energy-producing nation can undertake. Success depends upon effective collaboration, strong partnerships, regulatory certainty, technical excellence, investment confidence, and a shared commitment between government, operators, and industry. And as we have just heard from our previous speaker, those are precisely the issues our next executive leadership panel has been assembled to explore. I'd like to take this moment and acknowledge and appreciate session 2 that is proudly sponsored by McDermott. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome our moderator, a respected leader in energy policy and strategy with extensive international experience. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of Radial Circle, Mr. Ranti Omole. Let's give him a round of applause, and Mr. Omole will introduce his panel as well.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to this session. We've listened to Carlo, and he has emphasized the importance of collaborations between all the stakeholders and the impact of delay to first oil. So I have areas of experienced industry practitioners that are going to examine all the critical points and talk to us straight and frankly so that we can understand the impacts, both positive and negative, of decisions that we make. So the first person I'm going to call, it's Terry from Woodside. Terry, please. Then Mahesh from McDermott. Okay. Angela from Esploco, which is a Ghana GMPC. Rivaldo from NAMCOR. And Festus from NAMPO. That is Namibian Petroleum Operators Association. I will spend just a few minutes trying to explore our discussions, which will focus on effective partnership models between governments, operators, and investors, lessons learned from other emerging hydrocarbon provinces, aligning timelines, expectations, delays, and risk. It's been news for years about the huge discovery in Namibia. We talk about Venus, Graf, Mopane, Jonker. And we also found out that discovery alone does not make money. You can have discovery. We have seen it, not that you can have. You can have discovery and remain discovered for donkey years. But you know, the beauty of discovery is that if your policies are not good, it becomes assets to the operators. So when I'm talking about my discoverable reserves in my balance sheets, it becomes an asset for me. So I can use your discovery to borrow monies elsewhere for another project where the incentives are good. Because I've spent money for exploration to discover, and we've done valuation of what I discovered. So it stays in my balance sheet. It can be there for the next 10, 15 years. But policies must be right. Nigeria had a similar problem. Nigeria, Angola, they felt they were the brides of Africa. They can decide whatever they want before the new frontiers. For example, in Nigeria, we have the Bonga Southwest Aparo discovery since about 2011, 2012. We have Zaba Zaba. They all went through various processes. They didn't see any light of the day. Angola has similar problems. Angola was a bit quick by coming up with some fiscal improvements that made some of their projects to come on stream. And Nigeria quickly followed through, where we made some revolutionary changes or incentives, where the government upped the credits from about $3.450 per barrel to $11.50 for qualifying greenfield deep offshore. And for the NAG, from about $1 to about $8 per equivalent of oil. And it becomes a rule-based standardization. And also for the PSAs, it favors contractors more than the government. But not only that, they gave an FID deadline of 2029, that if you want to take advantage of those incentives, you must make your FID before 2029. And we can see that right now, in Nigerian environment, the Bonga Southwest is running towards FID, Zaba Zaba, same thing, Owowo, and other projects. Everybody dusting discoveries that have been there for more than 10, 15 years. So good fiscal policies, very important. We also realize that the timing, the matured people are saying, look, we lost out to the green frontiers, to the Guyana, to Mozambique, huge FID decisions, because our policies were still the old arrogant ones. And quickly, you could see what's happening. You have Guyana, very, very weird incentives to ExxonMobil that between 2016, for 750,000 people, they burned 900,000 barrels, with contracts already awarded or to be awarded for FPSOs, up to 8 FPSOs, with 2 million barrels target by 2030. It's real. And that's what's the kind of advantage that you can get. And equally, the timeliness of decisions, very important. Can you imagine Total Tilenga, whereby the discovery or production is about 200 to 300,000 barrels, and they need to construct 1,500-kilometer pipeline to export from inland to the nearest shore. Whereas there are other discoveries that they are just right inside water. You don't need to put pipelines. But because they made decisions at the right time before COVID and did FID, if they haven't done that, we'll have made called post-FID. Because even some FIDs were canceled after COVID, like the S exploration, FPSO awarded, and they have to cancel the FPSO. So it's important for us to realize that if you delay or renegotiate, you can talk about the Tanzania LNG. Before COVID, Equinor Shell, they were talking about 50 billion LNG projects. But somehow, a change in government renegotiated the contract. So today, whether the Tanzania LNG is going to take off is a different ballgame entirely. So on this note, it's just to let us understand that cooperation, win-win negotiations between all parties, very, very important. And also, making FID decisions at the right time, very important. So nowadays, it's like, when do you get to the market? Not even when you make the decisions. If you have been in the market with the Gulf crisis, you'll have made so much money. And if you get to the market at the wrong time, when there is glut, you may struggle. So on this note, I'm going to start with my first panelist, Terry from Woodside. Terry will just briefly talk about Woodside, and he will tell us what it is to make timely decisions through cooperations between all stakeholders. Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Ranji. Thank you. I suppose on that topic, I'll pick up on the same themes that have been discussed throughout the week here so far, and were very eloquently summarized by Carlo in the opening remarks. Delivery of FID and beyond, and much of the work before that, requires alignment. One of the key things is alignment across multiple interdependent work streams. You've got to understand the subsurface and define that in concert with the engineering work to optimize development options. You've got to have the commercial and fiscals. Can you hear me? You've got to have the regulatory clarity and environment in that place. You've got to have fiscal structures in place. And oftentimes, I think delivering FID it's all of those things. It's not a single bottleneck, if you will. Uncertainty is more difficult for the operators and all the stakeholders to manage than the complexity. These are big, complex things, these deep water developments. But we have lots of smart people to figure out the complexity. It's the uncertainty that is usually the derailer and or that brings the delays. I would suggest, I suppose, to sort of where things should be focused, which you could tell it is just by the energy here this week, that in the next weeks to months here in Namibia, the opportunity is to create clarity and momentum within those domains such that things can move forward. Another point I couldn't help myself as being the explorer here to make is that, to the point I think Carlo was making, at the moment it is about FID of these big things. But at the same time, I would encourage all the stakeholders in the ecosystem here in Namibia to consider the bigger picture. When we set these things up, let's have the long term in mind. We should, in parallel with delivery of the projects hopefully in the near term, also be considering what other opportunity there is. There's a massive amount of underexplored geology here. I think there's tremendous additional resource, and to the point that was made in the opening remarks, there's a great opportunity, I think, that stands out in the decades to come. So don't lose sight of that with too much focus on these near-term bottlenecks, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Terry. But just a follow-up question. Based on your experience at Woodside, in Senegal, in other places, what lessons do you want Namibians to learn from the way decisions are made, from discovery to FID, and maybe give some examples and why it is critical that decisions are made at the right time?
Yeah, it's a good one. So for us, I guess, for those that may not know, I mean, we have a couple of examples recently that are good to study from, I suppose, in learning space. And to the point you made, I think, about the Total and the pipeline, Sangomar was delivered in 2024, first oil by Woodside. Within 9 weeks, ramped up to 100,000 barrels a day. It was the first ever offshore development in Senegal. That FID was taken in January of 2020, just before COVID. Project was delivered on schedule, on cost, fantastic ramp up, huge source of pride and value for all stakeholders involved. Delivered first cargo to national refinery, which was fantastic for the Senegalese in terms of sort of the potential for energy independence. Delivery, to your point, I think, around COVID, and that these black swan type events can come at any time, which creates a sense of potential urgency. Delivery of these things is complicated, and the way that Sangomar worked was largely around early alignment across all of those stakeholders, being very, very clear on what was going to be required, communication across all of those fronts, and then just a very well integrated set of stakeholders who were open and engaged in delivery of the project. We are working on a very similar model without COVID in Mexico at the moment. We're building Trion, which will be the first ever deep water development delivered in Mexico. So both of those we're quite proud of, and these ingredients are the requirements for these types of projects.
Thank you very much. I mean, now we've seen the importance of making FID decisions at the right time, and the need and the fact that timing is critical, and we don't have to continuously negotiate, and by the time we're ready, things will have gone. And again, the Nigerian experience, when we had the discoveries around 2010 to 2012, it got to a state that every IOC were looking for rigs. You know, we're having rigs that will stay there for 3 years, drilling and moving from one company to the other, from Exxon to Chevron, you know, sharing rigs because of the level of work. But then, when incentives were not right, it took us 12, 13 years to radically bring in incentives that would bring back those who were queuing to invest several years ago. So from that, can I quickly move to Mahesh? Now, we've discussed on the timeliness, appropriate decisions, win-win for all parties. So how do we create alignment without slowing down projects? Mahesh.
Yep, okay. Thank you. Firstly, thanks for inviting me to this panel. This is my second year this conference, and I can tell you to start with that the energy level is definitely up. Last year we were still talking about basins and discoveries, and definitely there is an anticipation of something big about to happen. So I think it's great that we are in that moment. I mean, just to give a little bit of a context in terms of before I answer, it's not an advertisement pitch. So I obviously represent McDermott. It's a 102-year-old company doing offshore developments around the world. And, over the years, we have moved from shallow water to mid-water to deep water to ultra-deep water. And as the basins evolve and as geographies open up, we are working around the world. So some of the perspectives I will provide is based on the experiences we've had. Coming back to in terms of how do we then deliver together, I think key is this. Many of these big oil and gas projects, particularly say, let's take Venus as an example, which is close to everyone's heart here, are major capex challenged projects, right? So, and then you have to then start working on it for many years. They take many years to evolve and deliver. So if you take us as a contractor who's delivering the deepwater scope, we started work on doing some conceptual stuff in terms of design, strategy, etc. on Venus some 3.5 years ago. I mean, that's the time when obviously Total was probably doing some development drilling, assessing the basin, having discussions with the government. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that these type of technical assessments, analysis, etc. starts way early. It doesn't start at FID. So that's the first thing. So partnering and starting to do a lot of work upfront is very common in this industry. The second thing that needs to happen is once, let's say we get into an FID and we start getting into a project. Someone like us, which is a big service provider, would typically conceptualize, design, engineer, procure, construct, fab, and install the large subsea facility. But we don't just do it out of isolation. We have to have codes and standards in place. And you know, most of you who have been with the oil and gas industry know that we do not do anything reasonably new. We always say first of a kind, but there's nothing first of a kind. We have to prove it to death, 25 years of experience, 10 years of experience, of proven experience, because the environmental impact and the personal impact demands that we have that. So proven designs, what you have worked elsewhere, need to be then chosen and customized to the specific project. So once you've done that, we also then need to make sure that the suppliers you choose at the next level to provide components exist, they have track record, they can deliver on time, so that's the next piece that you have to tackle. Then once you go beyond that, I think the most important thing is then looking at the contracting mechanism in terms of how you as a contractor work with the operator and the operator versus the host government. So this is all about risk sharing. I mean, we all can talk about various contracting models. I can talk about specific contracting models we've had with, say, Woodside on Scarborough, where a lot of decisions were taken very early. There are other templates where you do things as things evolve. So there are various contracting models. But the crux of the issue is about risk sharing. These contracting models have to be in such a way that the schedule and then the quality and the safety are not compromised. With that in mind, how do we manage risk? The risks that exist on the project when you execute, that risk needs to be shared by all partners. We talked a lot about partnership. Carlo talked about it as well this morning in the speeches as well. So that partnership needs to be in such a way that there is equal sharing of risk, in a way that the party that is the best suited to manage or mitigate the risk manages the risk. So, for example, in a frontier basin like Venus, you cannot have the contractor take all the risk on, say, subsurface, take a lump sum turnkey, etc., on weather, unknown factors. It just doesn't work. So I think the key there in terms of making sure is that we all partner together. But once you've delivered that and you have a template, the lessons learned have to be quickly put in place so that we can repeat it. What we do not want, and I think you talked about the Guyana example, I have specific examples of what we've done in framework agreements with the likes of Inpex. A partner here does a lot of work with Equinor and Var Energy. So it's all about, once you have a template, is to then start repeating without trying to change things too much. That's the key there once you've got the template to success. Because when you have that, then you're able, contractors, service providers, operators can all look forward to a long-term, sustainable development, which means that they can then spend more money in terms of infrastructure, more money in terms of training people, and start bringing down the cost of developments. So it is not a single answer, but it is a combination of things that happen over the life cycle.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. We were made to believe once we had the discovery, the money is coming. Then suddenly we heard that, we need to take FID for the money to come. Now, I mean, as a tier 1 contractor, EPCIC, if we find the money, how long will it take us to have a production facility that will bring the first money? And in that journey, what challenges again can we have? That even when you take the FID, when you award the contract, what could also stop us from timely delivery of the FPSO facilities and the subsea infrastructures?
So repeat that, sorry, a little bit, in terms of what are the challenges specifically?
Yeah, from time, assuming we take FID today.
And I think I touched upon some of these. I think the challenges specifically are about ensuring that we keep the project moving. I mean, I will always say that. That's because, I mean, we are all engineers, many of us, and who take decisions, but up to what level do you engineer? And we have the concept of ALAP, right? You have to reduce the risk to as low as reasonably practical. You can never eliminate risk. So these projects are all full of risk. How do you manage risk? Take timely decisions. So I would say 3 or 4 significant things. One, go for proven technologies and processes. Number 2, go for repeatability in terms of contracting models. Number 3, make sure that the risk sharing is right. And 4, make sure that your supply chain and the sub-supply chain are all fully monitored, because without the last bolt or the nut, the project will never finish. So I would say, I would like to sum it up in those 3 or 4 different things.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Riwaldo, you've had Terry from Woodside, you've had Mahesh from McDermott, and we're talking about how do we create alignment. You're NAMCO, you're part of the government, and they've discussed about decision-making, regulatory approvals, commercial negotiations, risk allocation. From what you've heard, Riwaldo, where do you think Namibia should be more willing to be flexible to protect the schedule and get things done?
Thank you so much, Ranti, and Mahesh, really, for giving that contractor's perspective and highlighting the risk-sharing mechanisms from a contractor's point of view. So just by way of introduction, I'm Rivaldo, extractive industry practitioner. I head up the upstream legal advisory role at NAMCO. And really, if I can just take a step back, it's not just alignment that is needed. It is realignment that is needed also. And I liken to make an example of a really rudimentary example. It's really a journey that you travel on and you buy a new car. And this car is perfectly aligned, and eventually, as you travel on the journey, or rather the odyssey from decision to dividend, you realize that the car does get out of alignment and realignment is needed. So in a nutshell, you need your fuel, which is your, and then you also need a proper spare time. So in a nutshell, the ingredients really to keeping this vehicle aligned, in my view, is meaningful consultation and having an understanding base. So first oil is ultimately a project of alignment, aligning people, timelines, expectations, risks, and national objectives. And there is really a proverbial view that really expresses where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in a multitude of counselors, there is safety. Now, taking back to my vehicle alignment, if you, as NEMCO, we're part of 31 licenses, so you can imagine having 31 passengers giving you various directions in terms of where to go, and some may be suffering from food coma, like I can see in the room. But essentially, government ultimately sees national interest, the operator sees technical and commercial realities, investors see capital and returns, the NOC sees both commercial participation and national objectives, and the community see the impact on their future. And the real value is really bringing all those perspectives into one room, and the ultimate goal is not really to find a compromise, but to expose certain blind spots. And the further goal from the participants is not to own the compromise, but rather to see where the blind spots may exist. And this really ties into building a fundamental understanding base, even from a governmental point of view. So in my career as a practitioner, I've been quite involved in project financing. And really, as a projects lawyer, we do realize that the work done ultimately, by the time you start drafting, the project is already developed, so you're just putting the pieces together. But more so, the project development work is very complex, and I cannot emphasize that more. I've done some EPC contracting work and O&M contracting work on slightly more predictable industries, but a complex project such as First Oil ultimately requires a different level of insight, diligence, and you're not just coupling the commercial realities like Mahesh just mentioned, but there's also your social license to operate. You have various social and economic responsibilities that you also need to tie in, which becomes a real cost. So after you're done with all the technical work from an engineering point of view, you have got your complex procurement stream, and there's so much that could go wrong, even just with your procurement, even before construction starts. So all these realities is important to build this understanding base so that as an NOC, as a regulator, you understand exactly what it means to take this project from your development and ultimately producing your first oil. So in closing, there's some 4 practical questions that we can ask ourselves, and I had the privilege of developing a local content toolkit, and this was done in part with the World Bank and the African Development Bank. So in that co-authored piece, we essentially asked, are we engaging early enough to influence a decision? If it is not early enough, then it becomes mere notification. It's not meaningful engagement. The second question is, do we have the right people in the room with the right information and authority to contribute? The third question, have we clearly separated what is negotiable from what is not? Last but not least, can we explain afterwards how people's input changed or did not change the decision in hindsight? So my closing statement would be, really, if we do not make decisions from a meaningfully consulted position, we risk this vehicle from even being further misaligned in the future. So we need to make careful decisions, and we need to own the decision, otherwise everyone will own the delay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Riwaldo. For that incisive information. As NAMCO, that owns 10% in most of the fields, that's looking forward to first oil in 2030 to recover your investment. Now, listening to Woodside, to McDermott, about the various collaborations, negotiations, timeliness, win-win situations, are you still confident that you start getting returns in 2030 with the way things are, with various negotiations and agreements?
Thank you, Ranti. So, in my view, after moving from private practice really into joining the state ultimately, my interest has been slightly a bit more biased towards establishing a predictable local content regulatory framework. And this is the ultimate vehicle that will translate this value of the first oil down to the very Namibian. And for me, if we can mechanize the chief anchors of local content, being local employment, local procurement, local training, and local coordination in the likes of a JV arrangement, we would essentially bring that form of predictability, and we can also then have that stable legislative environment in order to allow the investors also to count the costs of that, and also then to make the decisions that would be in best interest of the people, because we have this, rather thinking that whenever there's oil, there's, money for everyone, and there's lots of opportunities, but we need to segment that very carefully. If it's employment, we need to look at the likes of AI, how that has impacted even the exploration, how it has impacted seismic studies, how quick that is. If we have the likes of having an ROV, for instance, that particularly can do the work of a human being, then we rather need to deviate from local employment rather to local procurement, and we need to rather have a calculated viewpoint on how we would enforce that Namibian and national interest. So from that point of view, I think, yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ami, for that encouraging, assurance. Before we take some questions and go to the second round, I have Angela from Ghana, the GNPC, their new exploration company. Your activities are still a bit behind of Namibia. That means as Exploco, and then moving from equity or non-operational, part of the arrangement, now into operational. Now, from what you're hearing, and from the strategy that you have from Exploco, what are the lessons that you can pull and put into your new mix so that you can also fast-track the various processes, discovery, planning for development, FID from these lessons?
All right, thank you so much, Wanti. First of all, I bring greetings from Ghana, and on behalf of my managing director, Sam.
So I should say Akwaba.
We are happy to be part of this conference to share our experiences. So, as you said, you are right. When it comes to our projects, Exploco's projects onshore, we are a bit behind what Namibia has at the moment, because we are just about starting with exploration in the Voltaian Basin, and we plan to do our first well by the end of this year. And so in terms of all what I'm hearing from the room, I think that we are taking quite a lot of lessons from the experiences and from the knowledge everybody is sharing. So what I would say is that when we are able to drill the first well and we make our first discovery, what the decision we need to do is very, very important. From the kind of things we put together, the legislations we put together, the infrastructure and everything we put together in making sure that we are ready for our first soil, it's also very important. And as we heard from the speaker, every decision delayed ends up delaying the next stage. And so it's important that we make informed decisions and timely decisions to be able to get there. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, then. Now, are you going to fund it through GMPC local equity, or you're going to work with investors? And if you're going to work with investors, what are the key things, 2-3 things that you need to ensure so that you can get investments to develop and produce the field?
Okay. So, well, we've started 100% operating the blog by ourselves. We have 100% working interest with 85% participating interest with GMPC, our mother company, having 15%. However, going forward, we are looking out for investors to come in to assist, to share in the financial and the technical risk together with us. So what we are doing at the moment is technically we are trying to make sure that we are integrating every data set we have available to make sure that we are reducing risk for the very first well we are going to drill. Apart from that, we are trying to get every social license that we need to get. We have engaged extensively the communities, the chiefs, elders, and all those who are supposed to be involved in this exploration campaign. Again, we have also, in terms of procurement, we've taken the lead to actually start discussions with service providers. We are looking out for rigs, wellheads, and all that. So we've taken that initiative to make sure that we are identifying the key players in the industry and anybody who is needed to be part of the campaign. So we are looking out for somebody or an investor who will come in to actually support financially and also technically, coming in with that experience from a frontier basin to be able to assist us.
Thank you very much. I think we'll just take a few questions so that by the time the panelists are going to answer the second round of questions, make some contributions, they can answer some of those questions. Maybe 3-4 questions, just questions so that they can answer. Thank you. Anyone? Just straight to the question, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Straight to my question. The gentleman from McDermott said that everything needs to be tried and tested to death. You need that assurance. And yet here in Namibia, we are tying all our hopes, or most of them, on local content participation, something we've not done before. So how do we marry those two, or is it a pipe dream? Thank you.
Okay.
No, it's a good question, right? It's because I'll be very honest and brutal. I mean, we go to many of the frontier countries, and I think local content is a very important subject for everyone. It's in everyone's heart, and I think we've heard it, because you don't want just to have a barrel of oil, you want to make sure that it adds value to the entire economy. So when we say tried and tested, we're talking about specifically technical components that have to be tried and tested. But if you typically look at an oil field or look at, say, a project, you probably have, a million moving parts in terms of technical pieces. We are talking about the key parts which have been tried and tested. There are many other things for which it is straightforward uses that from the day to day. So that is something that we will straight away start with, number one. Number two, local content, when we talk about it, I wouldn't talk about it in terms of percentages or in terms of values. I think it has to be something that has to be long-lasting and it has to be sustainable. So when we see that we have specific examples, we have seen it from our own perspective, what we have done in the Middle East, what we have done in, say, in Vietnam for about 35 years, wherein you build the capability, not on one project, but along a series of projects. To an extent, I think the first thing first, yes, we will involve local vendors from our perspective, operators' perspective. Then the second thing is skilling and making sure that that goes up further. And then the capability building should be ultimately in a place where, like in the morning, Cornelia Shilunga talked about, is where we are ready for export, which is the ultimate piece. But today, when we say that we have to then use processes and technical components that are tried and tested, we are not saying that every piece, every bolt has to be tried and tested. The system, key components have to be tried and tested. But there are many other components which can be easily procured from the market, and that's what we're talking about local content. I think the masterclass yesterday talked a lot about some of this and how it can be done, to answer your question. So I hope that allays your fears. It's not that everything has to be imported.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Ranti, can I maybe also just comment on that?
Yeah, wait, I'm going to call you.
All right.
If there's no other questions, now we can now write more on where you want to contribute, which is basically, how do we maximize local value without compromising first oil timelines? Namibia wants first oil to catalyze genuine local industrial development, not simply export crude. At the same time, operators face demanding costs, safety, quality, and schedule requirements. How can Namibia increase local content and build competitive Namibian suppliers without creating costs or capacity constraints that ultimately would delay first oil? So what should government, NAMCO, operators, tier one contractors do differently? So you will start, then thereafter, Festus, and then Mahesh.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ranti. So really the question from the room is a really legitimate question, because on the one side, you have got a very complex project such as First Oil. We have heard from Carlos that it is, ultra deep waters. They have been awarded for, drilling the deepest well ever in the world. And you hear of all these complexities, and from the Namibian stance, you're thinking, how will these service level arrangements be interrupted? And the answer really is doing a proper gap analysis that will necessitate that whenever the company contemplates a procurement contract, that they can make it part of their contract to at least train some of our engineers when it comes to very complex designs, for instance, really to second them to those companies. When it comes to procurement, there's a lot of students that study supply and logistics, and just to be part of that scope, of that magnitude, there's so much that you learn. Just on insurance alone, you'd have to negotiate at length where does the insurance start, the scope to the shore ultimately, and all these moving parts ultimately to build your base, or even now that Total is contemplating building an FPSO. We're quite aware that no one in Namibia has built an FPSO before. And it's the same for a lot of the countries that haven't reached first oil yet, but more so, especially those that are obviously exploring within the deep waters and the likes, and they cannot build a pipeline. So what I'm saying is that this contract now, even with Total, if the local content framework is the policy is done and it's now mechanized through your regulations, it will necessitate that Total as a company, together with its contractors, submits a local content plan, and that local content plan will be vetted internally, and there would be models that will be built in order to recommend a further local scope. And that is exactly where the average Namibian can then participate. And I'd end with this. It is not up to us just to sit still. We need to prepare for that position. We need to have that foresight. And I think Mr. McLeod mentioned it quite well. If it is a specialized skill, we already need to position ourselves to have the foresight to really realize and generate maximum value from that opportunity.
Okay,
Thank you.
yes. I mean, thank you very much. Festus, now, I need to hear from you. And before Mahesh speaks, Mahesh, I've had an additional question for you. So let's listen to Festus first.
No, thank you. I think next time I'm going to make sure I don't sit at the end. I think local content is very, very important, but obviously first one needs to get through one critical event that will actually enable us to make local content participation even more worthwhile. And that event is actually FID. For now, we are actually talking, and we are talking about hope of something that may happen, but there is a real no commitment on the table, meaning that, yes, things are taking place, but that is small crumbs from starters that we are actually getting. So the main thing is actually yet to come. I think the most important thing is that we do have a policy. We now heard this morning that the policy has been approved, and that's the guideline in terms of what we want to achieve. Now, from the perspective of the industry, especially the members that I represent as NAMPOA, which is the upstream operators, we are fully committed to the issue of local content. And we want to really make sure that whatever we do, we really give a lasting impact on the community. So great, we have that component of the policy. The policy is in place. Hopefully it will be circulated very soon. But then there are elements that we also need, both as an industry and as a society, to put in place for us to benefit much more from the local content. Now, some of those is actually just making sure that we do understand where are we and what stage are we in terms of exploration, development, production, and the local content ideas and implementation that we should be putting forward should be fitting within the context as to where we are as an industry. So if you're in the development stage, obviously you should be looking at things that are fitting in there. And if you are in the production stage, so the things will actually keep on moving on. Some of the things may still be falling back to the government, where we are saying, fine, we want to make sure that this or that is produced locally. But one, do we have the people who are able to produce it? And if we don't, what are we doing about that? And sometimes could just be a simple thing as a space. Yes, you want to have these things manufactured locally. Of course, we may want them, for example, in this case, closer to the sea, and nobody's providing space for that to be done. Obviously, if you have FID, the items may still come in, the show must go on until, of course, we sort ourselves out in terms of having the right infrastructure in place for the industry to utilize, to be able to foster the local content. But otherwise, we are fully committed to that, and I'm sure we should be able to benefit. I think I need to touch on the question that was posed earlier by the gentleman. I think it's a very good question, because we are saying, here we are Namibians, we have not been in this industry before, so you wouldn't expect us to actually have the experience in being able to deliver the things that are tried and tested. And this is where we need to work in terms of partnership as Namibians, both amongst ourselves and also with other people from outside. And here, if we take a long-term view, and this is essentially what we should be doing, we should be able to go to somebody somewhere who has done it before and be able to structure an agreement that enable us actually to get the skill that we need, so that we say, come in, hold our hand for the next 10 years, and after that period, of course, you will leave us as Namibians, and then we are able to carry on with that business. So the opportunities are there, but of course, we must position ourselves so that we are able to bring those who know the things in and out and structure the agreements it's a normal thing done in the financial markets as venture capital. So we go in 10 years, 15 years, you get out, you leave us here as Namibians being able to do the things on ourselves.
Yeah, thank you very
I think
much.
we can make it.
Yeah. Now, Maresh, you have to be frank and you have to be realistic. Namibia discovery is ultra deep, which may be 140 miles, 200 miles from shore, and flying hours. It means building the FPSO from Asia and tow down to Namibia. Also, you got the subsea, which means go inside the Atlantic Ocean to install the UFR and things like that. And I've been hearing local content opportunities, local content opportunities. What, where, just in 2 minutes, which area, realistically, truthfully, that you think the opportunities over there without compromising the cost, delaying the project, and compromising the quality of the work, and also based on perceived availability in Africa, not only in Namibia, in Africa, for some of those scopes. Yes, you.
Yeah, okay. I'll do that. Okay. No, I think we have to take I think the gentleman made a very good comment. See, local content has two components in my view. And looking at it, I wouldn't say we should use the word local value add, right, and then content, because it should not be based on percentages or dollars. It should be based on something that is a little bit more long term. So there are two areas. One is immediate, local, available matching, gap analysis. We talked about it in terms of what we can do. But I think more importantly, what we've seen, I think work in other geographies is, number one, equal partnership in delivering long-term value. For example, today in Namibia, on the, let's say the Venus project, we know that we have certain plans for local content over and above that of a fabrication facility being done in Walvis Bay, which may not be only for this project, but for the next 15, 20, 25 years. We have partnerships with the university to start tailoring some of those contents in terms of oil and gas, and then skill sets being made available and ready. And then third, we are also talking to certain people in terms of starting some small amount of design work in country with a lot of training from us. So these are things that may not show you value in the next 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But what they will do is add value in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Of course, what you will readily see value is the number of hotels, number of cars, number of restaurants, that will all where people will come here and spend money, but that you will see immediately. But that is not what we are talking about when I talk about local content. In my view, we are talking about things that will be of lasting value. I will take the specific example because we can all talk about it, but if there are specific proven examples, prove that it can be done. I will take the specific example. 35 years ago, when we entered Vietnam as McDermott, it was before my time, well before my time, obviously. So we partnered with a company called Petroleum Technical Services, which was a government-appointed company. We opened a fabrication yard. We sent our people. We then trained them. They were our partners on some projects over a period of time. Today, I can tell you that they compete against us in many geographies. So what that tells you is, I think that's good for the industry. That's a classic example of how it should evolve, and they have not just become a partner for Vietnam, but they are now exporting elsewhere, and they've become a premier company. I think that's long-term value addition. So that's what I am talking about when I say local content. So short-term, benefits will come immediately when project comes, people spend money here, economy will move up in terms of day-to-day services like I talked about. But I think the lasting value will come when you start implementing and investing and training in capability of people, fabrication services, engineering services. That's what in the end will then create lasting value in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That's my answer.
Thank you very much. I'm a bit confused because I thought I was saving time again, and I see time is up. Is it true, or there's something with the timing system? Pardon? 10 minutes more. Fantastic. So I will give 2 minutes. And do you have any? Oh, I have 25 minutes, huh? Okay. Now that we've spoken about local content, is anyone needing clarity? Okay. Any other person? Okay, I have 10 minutes. Okay, fine. Okay, so we'll take from him, and then we'll round up.
To Nampua. Okay, I have a question on local content. Because now the oil and gas industry is something new to Namibia, and somehow Namibian local businesses aren't really ready in terms of capacity, and government has a policy that says you must procure or use Namibia as Nampua. Don't you think that that policy somehow is going to starve your clients or your members?
Okay. Felix, you will answer that, and also you will tell us your association expectations, assuming the first oil in 2030. What do we see longer in Namibia? And same as Waldo, because you are the owners of the country. So what are your expectations? What do you want to see after the first oil and the legacy?
No, very good. In terms of the policy and where we are, in terms of our ability to deliver on the expectations, I think the policy gives us a good base. And what we are doing as an industry is realizing that, look, if we look around, there are some capabilities that we have, but at this stage we are actually guessing that maybe we have that, maybe that we don't have. And so it is from this perspective that we have gone ahead with an industry baseline study. And what that study is actually giving us is indicating to us that here we have what it takes, here we don't, and based on that, then we should be able to come up with ideas or perhaps programs, not necessarily just as an industry, but as a country, that if we want to make an impact in this area, this is what we need to do to be able to get to that. But if we take example of things like welding and so on, maybe the curve will actually could be shorter. But then you take issues like engineering in the wells, then maybe that will take longer. But if we know that we don't have it now, then
Sorry,
of
1
course
minute more.
we build it up so that we get there. Okay. Otherwise, again, joint venture, get partners. Let's get others to help us.
Okay, thank you.
Now,
sorry, we have limited time.
Yes.
Don't worry, I will give you a parting shot if I'm able to squeeze that. Rewaldo, 2 minutes.
Okay. I'll try and give 30 seconds to Festus. So just in short, I really want to emphasize that local content is really not a part-time obligation. Local content is really a philosophy in terms of how you look at business. And I can understand we are very nascent, a nascent industry to tackle some of the opportunities, but however, the setup starts now. And I'm just making an example as NEMCO, we generate a lot of our revenue through data sales. And then I did a practical inquiry by searching how much does a seismic vessel actually cost. And I found that it costs about, on average, a second-hand model about $5 million USD. And I asked, well, as government, is there no way how we cannot raise this vessel so that by the time that there's any data acquisition, we can then put a local content requirement for this vessel to be used, for instance, and it can be maintained, and obviously there's now local revenue that will be generated earlier on. So this is just one of the examples, and as you have said, this pot, in Namibia we make potjie kos. In this pot there's various ingredients, but the very end of those ingredients, if we can find a way to grow it locally now already, that will set us up to take advantage of the project ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, within the 5 minutes I have left, Angela and Terry, if you had the authority to change one thing in Namibia's oil and gas framework tomorrow, to bring first oil forward without compromising safety, environmental standards, or value to the country, what will you change?
Well, I think that personally, I think that 100% support from the government is very important. And so if there's nothing like that, or maybe there's some level of support to the contractor party, I think that's one thing I would like to change, because supporting the operator or the contractor party 100% before they do is something that will go a long way to impact the project. Thank you.
Terry.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, simply put, I would say the focus should be on creating a clear and credible pathway for future investment across the upstream, not just the focus on delivering the current projects which are in the queue, but looking beyond that. Clear, credible pathways to invest in exploration all the way through to operations and production period for these licenses and the opportunity, because it's rich and there's a tremendous space here for running room. And the focus on local content in much of the topics is rich, but I think it comes to a point where a bit of trust and a bit of courage and action will go a long way.
Mahesh, 1 minute.
Yep, I'll stick to a couple of things. First thing I would say, I think there's been a lot of discussions, lot of thinking, lot of analysis to come up with the local content policy, to come up with the regulatory framework, etc. in Namibia. And I think when I look at it, Namibia is far ahead before its first barrel of oil in terms of the thinking process compared to many other places. So the first thing for me is keep moving, move. If you don't make FID, if you don't move, then you will not have those opportunities. Of course, it's based on an 80-20 rule, so you can tinker with it as we move along, but I think there is a good framework available. Time now is to make the move. And the second thing I would say is we talked about how do we enhance, whether it's first oil, whether it's fiscal terms, whether it's local content, all of those things, it's all about partnership, but I will enhance that word by saying equal partnership. I know we talked a lot about partnership, but it has to be equal, where you cannot have unequal partnership of one party taking all the loads. So it has to be the government, the respective agencies, the contractors, the operator, the supply chain, all of them, the universities, if you're talking about skill, everybody has to be an equal partner and has to be committed for the long term. So these are the two things I would focus on.
Thank you very much. My own parting notes is just share one or two experiences. A few years ago at SIPEC in Lagos, Sierra Leone, Liberia, the authorities, they came. And they said, look, investors, come. We don't have policies or framework. Let us discuss. Today, all those fields are heavily taken by Exxon and Mobil aggressively. Also, Nigeria had those discoveries on the shelf. Huge one, 12, 13 years ago. But today they realize that they have to move forward. And they put in the right fiscal policies, incentives, that all those things, that all those players have been dusted, and they're back on stream. So, to government, to people of Namibia, if you want first oil, you need to be pragmatic. You need to look at what people have done to bring investments to the country. Every country, every port, every land in Africa and Middle East, they have discoveries. Israel, Cyprus, unbelievable places. They have huge discoveries. And the money is limited. So for you to survive, for you to have investment, you are competing against the world. And that's stark reality. So, you need to go back, you need to sit down, legislators, government, and say, look, what do we do to bring our investments forward? On this note, I thank all my panelist members for the rich contributions, and also for the audience for taking time to stay with us and listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our moderator, Rancio Mole, and our distinguished panelists. Thank you for a fascinating discussion highlighting the importance of partnership, alignment, and shared purposes as Namibia progresses towards development. Please remain on stage. I would like to call back Jason to hand over token of appreciation to our panelists and moderator. At this juncture, I also invite our photographer and the media who's present to capture this moment. Thank you. Thank you once again to our moderator and distinguished panelists. We now move on to the next item on our program. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, as Namibia advances from exploration and discovery towards the development of a new petroleum industry, our conversations cannot only be about resources, investment, and infrastructure. They must equally be about people, about decent work, fair opportunity, skills, labor relations, and a legal environment that ensures that Namibia's emerging prosperity is both inclusive and sustainable. It is therefore particularly fitting that we hear this afternoon from the Minister whose portfolio sits at the very heart of those considerations. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming the Honourable Philemon Wise-Emmanuel, Minister of Justice and Labour Relations of the Republic of Namibia, to deliver his ministerial keynote. I think we can do better than that. Let's give the Honourable Minister a round of applause.
Honourable Minister, good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director of Proceeding, for your kindness with which you have invited me to the podium. you have indicated that you've invited me to deliver a ministerial statement. I think for those that may have interacted with me, at one or two other platforms would know that I do not do statements. I am a provoker. I sponsor conversation. I'm a patron of conversation. But before I get into what is it that I intend to talk about today, allow me to acknowledge everybody that is here, in whatever capacity that you are making your entry. I acknowledge you, but most specifically, I want to acknowledge the organizers for this very important event. An event that is taking place at the most appropriate time. An event that is taking place under a very timely, persuasive, and authoritative theme. A theme that speaks directly to the moment before us. A theme that speaks directly to us. A theme that speaks directly on our behalf. Therefore, as I would denote, or as I will characterize my remark, it's to speak to the appropriateness of the theme that this conference is dealing with. From decision to dividend, making Namibia oil work for Namibians. This theme challenges us to ask ourselves a very critical question. And that question is, or it's not about whether Namibia will explore oil or whether Namibia has discovered oil, but it's more about whether Namibia is prepared to govern its natural resources, to govern, the exploration process of the discovered oil and industry, and ultimately, whether an ordinary Namibian would realize the full dividend of this oil. Now, between the process of decision making on whether we should proceed and explore oil, and the distribution of the dividends that comes from that oil, lies one fundamental thing. And that is law. Between the process of exploring oil and gas and the distribution of dividend coming from that process lies one thing, and that is law. For every barrels that will be produced it will be anchored in a contract. For every job that will be created or a job that will be left vulnerable lies the employment standard. For every skill that will be transferred, for every technology that will be developed in this industry, at the core of it is the rule of law. At the core of it is the regulatory framework. And at the core of it is the labor law. If the answer to those questions is no, then what it would mean is that we will discover oil, but we would not have, or we will not realize the full dividend from it. As we develop this specific industry or this emerging industry, our developmental trajectory and path must have a human face. It must be about how do we ensure occupational health and safety of those that will be employed in this industry. It must be about how do we ensure dignity of those that will be employed in this industry. It must be about how do we ensure job security by this industry, and how do we ensure decent pay and decent wages for those that will be employed in this industry. And how do we ensure effective general welfare of the Namibians that will be working in this industry? The questions that we must ask ourselves is whether an ordinary young person from Fachras, a young person from Shukmansberg, a young person from Vukalo, a young person from Omtere, a young person from Otamanzi, a young person from Okangwati, a young person from Odimbwa, sees a career opportunity in this emerging industry. An entrepreneur, sees a place in the supply chain of this industry. A lawyer, young lawyer like myself, a geologist, an accountant, must be able to associate with the strategic direction of this specific industry and be able to see him or herself occupying a specialized position within this industry. And it cannot be a misdirection on our part. When we say the intent must become the implementation. We simply means that all those aspirations that we have must be translated into effective policies, effective laws, and effective institutions. That where law needs to be developed and be strengthened, that law must be developed to protect the interest of the Namibian. Where institutions need to be strengthened, those institutions must be strengthened. And where leadership need to be developed, or the leadership pipeline and succession strategy need to be put in place, it must be put in place. For the development partners, for foreign investors, we need to remind them that we need their capital. We need their technology. We need their technical expertise. And we need their partnership with the world. But as they come in, we must ask, what legacy are they going to leave behind? Is it the legacy that oil has been extracted in Namibia? Or is the legacy that through this exploration and extractive operation, and Namibian has become better? That the true meaning of beneficiations got felt by every Namibian, regardless of how they are situated within the societal ranks and file. As it is for any developing nation, Namibia does not possess all the necessary and prerequisite skills that is necessary to ensure that this specific industry realize its full potential. We will be relying on some foreign expert to come and assist. But it must be in areas where we experience an immense shortage of skill. And it's not a shame to acknowledge that we are not yet there in terms of skill development. But as we bring in those brothers and sisters from elsewhere, we must ask critical questions. Who is learning along them? Who is an understudy? What kind of skill is being transferred? And how many Namibians over time are empowered and capacitated to be able to occupy those positions? The importation of the skills that we lack must not become a permanent substitute for local capability, for local capacity. It must be an interim measure that needs to be evaluated and monitored timelessly. So the legacy of this industry, as I have said earlier, it's not measured by the number of barrels that has been produced, but the enterprise development or enterprises or business enterprises that has been, that grew. The skill that has been transferred and the opportunity that has been created for an average Namibian. To the Namibian entrepreneurs, the opportunity is coming. The opportunity is coming. But this opportunity must meet preparedness. Must meet preparedness. The industry requires, that's a problem. I have not come with any note here. I haven't found a program. There wasn't time communicated to me. I don't have a framework to guide me. Okay, I don't have a framework to guide me. So hence, I used my judicial discretion. But as I conclude, I was on a margin of saying that opportunity is coming. This opportunity must be met with preparedness. The industry requires safety. The industry requires quality standard. The industry, require tax compliance. The industry require insurance. The industry requires timely, consistent, and professional delivery. You must prepare yourself for that. As for the government, we are ready, and you have heard about a month ago that we have approved the local content policy. We are prepared still to continue to put in place a legislative framework that would support and enable you to be able to harvest meaningful dividend from this industry. But as I say this, money laundering, see this also as a fertile ground. And all the other associated issues, we have a prosecution system in place for those that would act otherwise. And I say this as I acknowledge the presence of the Prosecutor General. Government is here to open doors for you and to keep those doors open. So let's then make sure that as we create employment, or as this industry creates employment, it's done in the interest of the nation. It's done in pursuit of workers' dignity. It's done in consistent to ensuring that every worker has job security and every worker has a decent job. Let's raise to the occasion, my fellow Namibian. Thank you very much for allowing me to sponsor those reflections.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for your valuable contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give the Honourable Minister another round of applause. Our next speaker continues today's focus on Namibia's regulatory environment and petroleum development. Let's put our hands together as we welcome the Acting Petroleum Commissioner in the Office of the President of the Republic of Namibia, Honourable Aune Amutenia. Let's give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you, Directors of Ceremony, Honorable Minister, distinguished delegates, captains of industry, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. It's a great honor to address you at the Namibian Oil and Gas Conference and to share an update on the status of Namibia's petroleum exploration, appraisal, emerging development activities, especially under the Office of the Petroleum Commission. Following the recent discoveries in the Orange Basin, Namibia is now entering the transition from exploration and discovery towards appraisal, commerciality, and field development. I believe it's important that we look at this transition not only through the headlines of discoveries, but also through the numbers of petroleum exploration licenses issued to date, numbers of wells drilled, the seismic survey that have taken place, appraisal programs, and regulatory milestones that demonstrate the scale of activities taking place in our country. Namibia at the moment have 30 active petroleum exploration licenses, and these are covering both onshore and offshore basins. And they cover now the Namibian major sedimentary basins now of the Orange Basin, Rooderitz, Walvis, Namib, Ovambo, and other small onshore frontier basins. This portfolio is important because Namibia's petroleum future should not be defined by one basin or one discovery. So the Orange Basin have become the center of current international attention by exploration, but exploration continues in other basins. Our objective as the regulator is therefore to maintain a balanced exploration portfolio, one that allows us to mature existing discoveries while continuing to test new geological opportunities. Before we drill a well, we need to understand what is beneath the seabed. That's why we conduct what we call a seismic acquisition, and it remains one of the most important national petroleum assets. Namibia have accumulated a substantial seismic database over decades of exploration. To date, we have acquired more than 100,000 line kilometers of 2D seismic data, and approximately 74,000 square kilometers of 3D seismic coverage. This extensive data set has been fundamental to the identification and maturation of prospects. This illustrates the enormous value of petroleum data. A seismic survey is not just simply a contractor's deliverable. It's a part of national petroleum information asset. We are also seeing significant new seismic activities. At the moment, we have completed approximately 3,000 square kilometers of data in PEL 83. That was done in 2025, and another seismic acquisition in PEL 82. There are also other planned multiple 3D seismic acquisition that will be done in blocks 2912 and 2913B. These programs are critical for improving our subsurface imaging and advancing prospects and discoveries towards appraisal and development. Exploration drilling, 27 wells, and we are still counting. The scale up in exploration activities over the last 4 years has been remarkable. 27 exploration and appraisal wells were drilled between 2021 and to 2026 as part of the recent exploration phase. This number is particularly important when one considers that Namibia was, until very recent, regarded primarily as a frontier basin. So the wells drilled has fundamentally changed our understanding of Namibia's petroleum systems. Looking forward, we have identified more than 10 wells that are planned to be drilled in the Orange Basin during the 2025-2026 period. Therefore, the drilling activities we are seeing is no longer purely exploration drilling. It's a combination of exploration, appraisal, development, and eventually production wells. In the Orange Basin, we have 14 discoveries that were done by various operators. These include the Venus, Graph, the Merlin, Mopane, Capricornus, and Volans. The most advanced one is the Venus, which is moving to development. And the FID is targeted for 2026, with first oil expected in 2030. License 83, 39, and 85, they remain focused on appraisal, whereby they are further drilling and they will acquire some seismic data to reduce some subsurface uncertainties and establish commerciality. So the key role of the Petroleum Commission's office is to ensure that appraisal is rigorous, uncertainty is reduced, and development decisions are based on reliable geological, engineering, and economic data. The numbers are important, but the quality of data is more important. I would like to emphasize that the number alone does not determine success. But what matters is the quality of information generated from these activities. Therefore, every well must answer a technical question. Every seismic survey must reduce geological uncertainty. Every appraisal program must improve resource confidence. Every development plan must demonstrate technical and economic robustness. This is why the capacity of the Petroleum Commissioner's Office and the wider upstream regulatory system must grow alongside the industry. In closing remarks, Namibia have moved a long way in a very short period. We have moved from asking whether our offshore basins contain commercially significant petroleum systems to asking how we can responsibly develop them. The numbers tell a remarkable story, but the next chapter will even be more important. Our challenge is no longer simply to discover oil. Our challenge is to convert discoveries into commercial viable projects, projects into production, and production into sustainable national development. As government, we remain committed to fostering a predictable, transparent, and technically robust regulatory environment that supports responsible investment, innovation, and strong partnership with international industry players. But above all, we are committed to ensuring that Namibia petroleum resources are developed for the benefit of all Namibians. Let us therefore continue to explore with ambition, appraise with discipline, develop with responsibility, and produce with a purpose. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Aune Amutenya. Your remarks provide valuable context as Namibia continues to strengthen its position as one of Africa's most exciting emerging petroleum provinces. Ladies and gentlemen, our final executive leadership discussion for today shifts our attention now to one of the most dynamic segments of the global energy industry. Independent operators and new entrants often bring agility, innovation, fresh thinking, and new investment models that can accelerate exploration and development. Today's discussion explores how these organizations continue unlocking value within frontier basins while creating opportunities for collaboration and long-term investment. Please welcome our moderator for this session, Energy Policy and Strategy Advisor for Future Energy Partners from Trinidad and Tobago. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Tony Paul. The floor is yours, and also to introduce your panelists this afternoon.
Good afternoon, all. Let me practice my Namibian. Good afternoon, all. Nice to see you here. We have a fascinating session this afternoon. I know you're all excited to get into it. Let me bring my panelists onto the platform. But before I do that, let me just describe quickly what we're going to do. Oops. I gotta get my technology working. Dr. Abubakar Abbas is from the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. He's in a ministerial meeting at the moment, so I'm hoping he joins us very shortly. So here we have an able replacement. Yeah. Are you going to be on the panel? Okay, great. So let me call the members. So, yeah. To the panel. We have Angelique Peak from RMB Namibia. Selma Usiku from Eco Atlantic. And Solomon. Solomon is here. Iwanehi. Welcome.
Thank you.
Again, welcome to this session on independence and new entrants, unlocking value in frontier basins. Now, there's a useful distinction to make at the beginning, at the very outset. And we've heard this several times this morning and throughout today. A petroleum discovery is not yet a development. A geological opportunity is not necessarily an investment opportunity. An acreage, however prospective, creates no economic value while it remains acreage. So somewhere between geology and production, somebody has to be willing to take the risk, to convert one into the other. This is where independence and new entrants can play a particularly important role. Now, before I go on, let me let you know my bias. I am a geologist, and that's my background. And there was, when I was starting in the industry, there was a very popular saying, and it goes back to some of the old oil, and I'll use the term they used then, the old oil men in the United States back at that time. And there was one called Wallace Pratt. And he had a statement that endured into the 70s, and it went like this. He said, oil is found in the minds of men. Now again, the language is 50s language. So oil is found in the mind of geologists, essentially. Why is that so? Because the geology under the earth is very variable in what the kinds of rocks, the properties of those rocks, what happened to those rocks over time. And we study geology, we study what's happening under the ground in not 3 dimensions, but 4 dimensions, because time is a factor. Now consider that fact, and consider that we only have very limited information in terms of data, either remotely, like seismic, or actual physical data, like wells. It therefore means that geologists have limited data and have to make predictions on what's actually below the ground. That leads you to understand that there's no unique way that that data can be converted into a unique story. So in other words, there are multiple interpretations. It's something that geologists say, we're happy to have multiple interpretations of the data, but you must honor the data. Now, coming back to that statement about oil being found in the minds of men, what you make of data is a function of your experience, what you've seen, where you worked, and the data itself. So given that there's no unique solution to the problem, it's always useful to have different points of view. One of the things that I've learned in my career is that big companies have very structured approaches to doing exploration, to making investment decisions. And that is really important to get rid of risk. It also dulls the innovation, and I've seen that in the industry too. And what has happened in places, in Africa and other places, is that smaller companies or smart geologists or experienced geologists will take a set of data, make an interpretation, and find a concept that says, aha, this is a unique concept that nobody else has thought about. I want to get somebody to invest in this. I want to find somebody to convince, to spend the money and take the risk. And they might do that. And that's what happened in places like Ghana when Jubilee was discovered. A bunch of young, smart geologists came up with an idea and found the field, Jubilee Field. But these guys had never developed a field before. So they didn't have so exploration takes ideas and data. Taking it to appraisal and development takes money. And that brings in another party. Now, in making that exploration concept into a discovery is one thing. Taking it into appraisal is another. And therefore, the parties in oil and gas going through these stages may form partnerships. So what I want to do is use that concept to share with you how we've structured, with my conversations with the panelists, how we structured this discussion. So, where independence and new entrants can play a particularly important role, for instance, they may pursue opportunities that are too early, too specialized, too small, or simply outside the portfolio of the majors. Majors have priority in their portfolio. They may not want to go after it. They can sometimes make decisions more quickly, use different technologies, different business models, structure partnerships more flexibly, and can concentrate management attention on a smaller number of opportunities. And I think I heard that this morning. Rhino was saying we have a limited number of opportunities. All our efforts have to focus on that, and that helped them succeed. But we should not romanticize agility. Smaller companies often face smaller balance sheets. Frontier exploration consumes capital long before it produces cash. A discovery can create a much larger funding requirement, as I mentioned earlier, for appraisal and development, and the company best suited to discover an opportunity may not be the company best suited to develop it. So this is really a conversation about an ecosystem: geology, capital, farmings and partnerships, fiscal and regulatory predictability, as we've been hearing this today, access to data and infrastructure, and that's quite important. And of course, local capability, and particularly for gas, whether there's a viable market at the other end. And that's something that you have to think about. In Namibia, there's gas there, where people go after it if there's no market yet. So our discussion today will follow a simple chain. And the panelists assembled here are quite capable of doing that. Where's the opportunity? What makes it investable? How do we unlock it? Who finances the risk? How should partnerships work? What does Namibia need to provide to encourage and invite independence and new entrants? And critically, how does Namibia ensure that petroleum development works for Namibians while remaining competitive for capital? And we've heard that all day long. So I'll begin by asking each panelist for a short intervention, no more than 5 minutes. And in that, I've asked them to use the first 30 seconds to introduce themselves, the organization, and the perspectives they bring. And then to give us one or two propositions of what they most want to bring to the table. After that, we'll go into a fully moderated discussion and then close with some questions and answers. So I'll bring Angelique, ladies first.
Thank you very much, Tony. Excuse my voice. Too much talking already. So my name is Angelique Peak. I head up the oil and gas strategy for RMB and FNB Namibia. And as you will know, we are by no means an oil company or an independent oil company, but we are one of the largest financial services groups in Africa. And we have made it our business over the last 4 to 5 years to really understand this industry at every layer, from operators to tier 1 and 2 contractors and all the layers that come beneath it. Because ultimately, our government and our country requires from us to ultimately be able to enable this ecosystem, the local companies and the regional companies and some of the international companies. So for me, I suppose there's two sides of the conversation in this bucket. There's the investment side of things and what attracts capital, and then there's the financing side of things. Investors don't fund rocks. They fund risk-adjusted returns. And banks fund clarity, certainty, predictability. And that is one of the reasons we've done a lot of work and continue to do so to understand this industry. I mean, it's completely new for Namibia, which means it's new for all of us. But only by understanding it deeply will we be able to fund this ecosystem, finance it in every different layer that is possible. So I think from a local content perspective, and I don't think we should go too much into that, ultimately, for me, the first prize is not just finding hydrocarbons. It's building an ecosystem around them, and then Namibia will win.
Thank you, Angelique. Selma?
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Selma Usiku. I am an advisor on the board of Eco Atlantic. I'm in fact standing in for my colleague, the South African country manager for Eco Atlantic, Annalene Enselin. And really, when it comes to independence, unlocking value, Eco Atlantic is no stranger to that platform. We, in fact, have 3 frontier exploration blocks across both sides of the Atlantic, in Namibia, in South Africa, and of course, Guyana. And both of these, or all 3 of these transactions, or stepping into exploration didn't happen because we lost interest in frontier exploration. But it's because we saw an opportunity to do exactly what independents do, and that's to create value initially and bring in the heavyweights who are able to, on a scalable way, develop and deploy resources, especially capital. So I think most importantly, especially for a smaller independent like Eco-Atlantic, conversations around local content, especially local capability, which is not necessarily the same thing, is a very important conversation, but also the role of government in ensuring that that environment attracts these very scarce exploration dollars. And I think that would be the main messages I would like to bring from the smaller independence perspective to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Selma. Solomon, I'll come to you next.
Thank you. I would like to be on the podium, please.
You want to, yeah? Okay. Solomon has a short presentation first. Yeah.
I hope my slide is up. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Solomon Ewanehi. I am the founder and group CEO of Solewan Group. I'm here to quickly do a bit of reflection on how we can translate the discovery into happiness. We have to think about that, because we have to be happy as Namibians. If you have resources and you are not happy with yourself, I don't think that resources is worth it. I was working on a research Jim Rowe was talking about in 1989, 7 strategies of wealth and happiness. He talked about something. If the amount of money we have in the world is distributed equally to everybody, somehow you will discover that the money will find the way back to these same people that we're talking about, oh, the richest man in the world. Have we talked about that? Even in the room where we are seated now, if this discovery is converted into huge revenue and distributed amongst us here in the room, you will discover that within 2-3 months, the money will set 6 to 10 minutes.
6 minutes.
All right. So we'll see. It is an honor to stand before you today in this NOGC, a moment that is very, very crucial and important. The theme of this year's conference, From Decision to Dividend, Making Namibians Oil Work for Namibians. It is more than a conference theme. I believe it is a national development proposition. Because the discovery of oil is not in itself the dividend that we are talking about. The real dividend begins when nations can transform these natural resources into jobs, industry, skills, technology, businesses, infrastructure, lasting economic value for its people. It is on this note I'd like to give a bit of history to Solewan Group. How Solewan Group was established. 26 years ago, Solewan Group was established to provide industrial protective paints and application of these paints to pipes and menters. Over the years, we transformed that services into specialized coating system, building the pipe coating system to fabrication, feed joint coating, and manpower training. Today, Solewan Group has developed an integrated energy industrial group spanning into conglomerate of 6 strategic businesses: Solewan Nigeria Limited, Solewan Specialty Protective Coatings and Paints Limited, Pipe and Paints Industry Limited, Field Joint Coating Limited, Solewan Energy Training Institute, Ukemezi Africa Limited. Sorry, I think. All right. So these companies are not just mere fragmentation. They represent each value chain that they are able to offer their solution. And we have also built within our industrial park in Onne, River State, 6 plants. And these plants include polyethylene and polypropylene pipe coating plants, concrete wave coating plants, coating manufacturing plants. We also have pipes and bend manufacturing plants, and of course, our ultra-modern quality assurance and quality control center. Our experience taught us one fundamental lesson. Local content does not happen because we write it into policy. It happens because we are deliberate to build capacity and deliver it. And this is perhaps the most important lesson we, as member of PETAN, Oil and Gas Trainers Association of Nigeria, and of course, the regulator of the industry, Nigeria Content and Monitoring Board, bring to Namibians. Our lesson in Nigeria, we talked about it yesterday, for over 69 years, we experienced the good one, and of course, the one you don't want to hear the story. But of course, it's always good. You have to learn from mistakes. And the reason I documented it, and last year I launched a book, Unlocking Africa's Energy Resources. It's in our bookstand D07. So please try and afford a copy for yourself, for your agency. We are not taking the resource back to Nigeria. Whatever is purchased from that book is resident here in Namibia, because we have office in Namibia. We have the downtrodden. We have some persons who, of course, will benefit from that work that I have done. I will talk about our Namibian office very shortly. One of the greater lessons is that local content must go beyond the question, how much of this contract can come to our company. And this is where I will talk about capability will remain in the country after this project is completed. It depends on whichever way we are looking at it. Will there be trained engineers, of course, experienced engineers, after the contract is executed in some of the basins that we're talking about? Will there be competent technicians? Will there be indigenous suppliers who, of course, will be trained? Will there be domestic manufacturing facilities that will be retained? Because value retention here is very key and important. These are the questions that transform local content from procurement mechanism into national industrialization strategy. As Solewan, we own an evolution that reflects this philosophy, meaning we have to develop the people, products, plants, and solutions that we offer. And the reason for which we have developed that mantra within the group, that it is not the project that we execute that matters. What is important is the experience we get from that project, taking it to another level. We are also the pioneer. Okay. We are also the pioneer of Africa Energy Summit, which, of course, we operate. And for the past 10 years, we'll be organizing that conference. And it's also coming up this year in November. And this conference has enabled Solewant to develop within that frame of time, because of exchange of ideas, 2 plants, pipe bend coating plant and coating manufacturing plant that we just launched last month in July. And for me, I feel it is important we dwell on this very reason and the benefit that Namibians will benefit from resource development to value retention. For too long, our continent has been rich in resources but dependent on external capability to develop these resources. We export raw materials, import technology, expertise, finished products. The result is capital flight, limited technology, ownership, and fewer opportunity for African enterprise. And this, for me, is the purpose of this conference, so that you don't also repeat this wrong trajectory that, of course, Nigeria, Ghana, Mozambique, and other countries, Angola, also got involved in the past. Imagine a future where the development of Namibian petroleum resources simultaneously develops Namibian engineers, technicians, suppliers, manufacturing infrastructure, and eventually Namibian companies exporting the expertise to wider African countries, and of course, across the globe. That is what we should be looking at here, developing our capability.
Thanks, Solomon.
And to conclude, because my moderator is saying we have to conclude, I would like us to look at the partnership and collaboration that we also shared in the last conversation, which is very, very key and important for Namibians. Institutions have to be built, investors, government agency. We can create that model which international expertise strengthens rather than displaces indigenous capability. Our proposition, therefore, is simple. Let us build with Namibian, not merely to work in Namibia. Let us create partnership, transfer knowledge. Let us develop local suppliers. Let us train local professionals, and let us exploit opportunities to domesticate manufacturing. Let us create industrial capacity that can ultimately serve Namibian and wider South African markets, the African market, and of course, the globe. I want to thank the organizers of this conference. God bless the Federal Republic of Namibia. God bless Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Solomon. Thank you. And you will get a chance to address some of these issues in the questions and answers. So before I get into the questions and answers, let me get Dr. Abubakar Abbas to introduce himself, and then we get into the questions. Thanks, Solomon.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you very much, EAN and Jason, for the invitation. Very glad to be here. My name is Abubakar. I come from GECF, Gas Exporting Countries Forum. I'm a senior energy focus analyst. It's 20 member countries that control nearly 70% of the global gas reserves and over 50% of the marketed natural gas. And the conversations and the mission we always have is to make sure that energy gets to everyone, particularly natural gas. One important thing that I just want to emphasize as an introduction is very much aligned again to the topic of today of new entrant in the frontier basin, is the concept of energy, particularly for Africa. We recently published a report called the Global Gas Outlook. And based on our internal modeling, we have seen over the next 3 decades, global energy demand is going to increase by nearly 20%. And despite that growth, what is worrying is where we see Africa. Africa energy demand is still going to double from the nearly 36 exajoule it is today to more than 60 exajoule. But the worrying part is the energy consumption per capita in Africa is very unlikely going to change. It's currently at 25 gigajoule per person per year, and that is the energy we all consume approximately in this region. But the global average is 70 gigajoule. You need energy for many things. At homes, you need energy to run schools, to run laboratories, to run hospitals, efficient transportation, communication, digitalization, computers, and many more. And what is important is very aligned to this conversation. I'm not going to go deeper at this stage, but just to emphasize that where we expect the energy to come within the next 3 decades is not from the existing field. So new investment cycles and discoveries in the frontier basin must come. In our analysis, 86% of gas that will be produced in 2055 will come from fields not producing today, meaning we need everybody on the table, the IOCs, the NOCs, but what is more interesting is the new entrant, and as part of the conversation for today, we'll be able to see some of the key roles that those new entrant and independent will be playing in supporting the regional and the global energy market. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Abubakar. So in preparing for this panel, we had some exchanges between members and myself, and we knew there were many critical questions to ask, but we also know we wouldn't have enough time, as we're seeing. So what we decided is I'll ask a few pointed questions to each individual, and within 2 minutes, they'll give us a sharp answer. We won't get all the answers now, but that'll leave space for questions afterwards or one-on-one conversations. So I'll ask Abubakar to answer a question that he's posed to me. So you wanted to frame this specifically around African frontier basins. What can an independent or new entrant do in that setting that a major sometimes cannot? And where does smaller scale become a disadvantage?
Thank you very much, Paul. Very interesting question, and I will try to be very short in this. But let us first of all set the context to it. Based on the analysis we have in the GECF Global Gas Outlook, 75% of gas production is going to come from offshore by 2050, within the next 3 decades, meaning frontier basins, basins that we have not explored. And the challenge is asking IOCs and some of the NOCs to do this alone cannot work, simply because the way NOCs and IOCs look at energy and energy market differ from the way the independents and the new entrant look at it. And that is the key enabling opportunity that should bring new entrant. And that is innovation, integration, and partnership. And I will just briefly clarify. You see, the big giants do not go too much into innovation because they feel for it to go into scale, you need a lot of investment. And let us be honest ourselves. Some of the major IOCs are not operating in their regions, particularly Africa. So we have to solve African problem the African way. And that is obviously where the new entrants and independents help. They bring a lot of innovation, and that innovation means connecting the market with the high-risk supply. Bringing, partnership that is trying to understand, if I have to produce gas from the Venus field, who are likely going to be the consumers? Is it for fertilizer? Is it for electricity generation? Or is it for petrochemicals? So connecting this dot matters. And another important thing is integration. We don't expect the market to remain country level. We expect it to be regional. Take, for example, we have the South African Power Pool that currently distribute electricity. If we have a concept whereby the independent are in, you'll be able to see Namibia exploring its gas with its high-level renewables, bringing and contributing to the South African power pool. So instead of being importer, we can convert those molecules into electrons, and that electrons go into the grid. And these are some of the few ways that we feel the role of independent will continue to emerge. Thank you, Paul.
Very insightful. Angelique, you made the point that the best geology doesn't always attract the most capital. When does an interesting geological opportunity become an investable business opportunity?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Tony. I think what's important is to know that as a country, we are competing with everywhere else in the world for capital, right? So while geology and recent successes in exploration make a big case for investment in the country, we still have to have clear policy certainty, a stable fiscal environment, a stable government, which luckily Namibia has a lot of these well-ticked, and we've seen investment in other industries and commodities for a long time. What investors are also looking for is credible legal systems, credible fiscal systems and financial systems, business open, friendly regulator. I've been told the fact that we're an English-speaking country helps a lot as well, but it also needs to understand that is there a path to commercialization? And I think that is why everybody is so on tenterhooks at the moment with regards to certain decisions, just waiting in the wings, hopefully. And if there is a route to commercialization, is there access to infrastructure? Is there access to services? And I think the whole infrastructure side of things is becoming quite a detailed, well-thought-out conversation in Namibia at the moment. So of all of the tick boxes that an investor is looking for, I think Namibia ticks many of them. What we are also having to be very clear on, however, is that we are facing delays. We still have some policy uncertainty, which creates a little bit of inconsistency in some of the policies, and that creates delays, and that creates escalation of costs. So while we have many, many good things going for us as a country, which definitely will attract capital, we need to just make sure that even if it's for all the right reasons, we can perhaps get the speed of execution on some of those decisions sorted out.
Excellent, thanks. What I'm hearing you say is that an investment committee looks beyond the rocks. Yeah. You look at the fiscal regime, stability, approval process, infrastructure, partnering, boots to market, and various things. How does capital stack up in opportunities for exploration versus appraisal versus development?
Yeah, I think one of the misconceptions is that the same capital is there for every phase, right? So you have risk capital, which is exploration, in the exploration phase. You have very much more validation capital, which is in the appraisal phase. And then you have infrastructure capital to go into the development phase. I mean, the development phase comes through construction and then literally the field development, which is a major exercise. We know it takes 3 to 4 years. It brings together an infrastructure ecosystem that is critical. And I think what's very important for any country to understand and where we stand right now is that if we don't get that infrastructure right, we lose out the opportunity on the multiplier of the ecosystems, right? If base cases for any of the companies that are getting the contracts, hopefully for Venus, are that they will do this from, I don't know, South Africa or Angola instead of Namibia because we simply aren't getting ready, then we lose the economic benefit of it. So I think the different types of capital will look at very different things. And the decision is based on whether it's risk capital or validation capital, or ultimately development capital.
That's fascinating. And one thing I want to get back to, not now, is Namibia wants local content. They want local participation. They want local investment. All those opportunities, at the end, perhaps if we have time, which of those opportunities can Namibians access now? Which ones can we build as Namibia grows its industry to get more investment, more value captures? So don't answer me now, but I'll come back to that because we're running out of time, but that's an interesting question. So I'll go to Selma. And Selma, you bring direct exploration experience in Namibia and South Africa, as well as Eco-Atlantic portfolio, and the farm-down exposure you've had. From the explorer side, what makes one frontier opportunity or jurisdiction more compelling than another when an independent is deciding where to deploy scarce capital? What makes a jurisdiction more compelling?
Thank you, Tony. I think to answer that question, I'd like to draw on an important point that Angelique made about the fact that not all exploration opportunities are equal. Companies have a different appetite for risk, but they're also competing on a very different scale when it comes to the stage of exploration. And I'd like to use Guyana as a good example because we operate in both. So from Eco-Atlantic's point of view, Namibia's capital chase is very different to Guyana. Guyana came from discovery to 200,000, 600,000 barrels per day in less than 10 years. That's a very different risk profile because of the pace at which it happened. And those enablers are very different to what is currently happening in Namibia. We're talking about fiscal terms that were matured. We're talking about infrastructure build-out that could actually be predicted. So that capital journey is much faster, and those kind of exploration dollars are much different compared to the Namibian case, where we are still very much in appraisal exploration phase. And when independents are looking to attract capital through majors, for example, there, as Angelique said, we're looking for fiscal terms that will allow us to make these sort of predictions when it comes to return. We're looking for set predictable turnaround times when it comes to license operations, when it comes to environmental approvals. Those kind of turnaround times matter because the capital is obviously geared to many different projects at the same time. And where things are predictable, where things are stable, that's where the faster exploration dollars go. And as Angelique said, Namibia is in a very good position already because a lot of these frameworks are already in place and they are already working. And certain initiatives from the government, for example, the local content policies that are currently under construction and are soon to be set out. Those are the kind of conversations that draw capital investment. And then obviously just having a clarity between what is expected from the independent to bring to the table in terms of local capability or local participation, which I said aren't exactly the same thing. So it's those kind of conversations from both the independents as well as the frameworks that are within the country where the independents are going to. As long as there's a balance, those are usually where independent oil and gas exploration companies like to place their dollars. And Namibia is compared to other frontier basins, very well placed in that sense.
Thank you. Solomon, your display was very impressive in terms of what you've managed to build and grow and unlock value in Nigeria. And now you're entering Namibia. What barriers can government remove now so you can unlock value in Namibia in the supply chain? In 2 minutes, if you can, give us some ideas. Let's help Namibia replicate what you have done in Nigeria, given your experience.
All right. Thank you very much. Before I delve into that, I'd like to talk about something that is very, very important in energy sector, which is a vocal word. The sector is very, very volatile. It is uncertain, very complex, and ambiguous. And because of this, everybody is always very, very serious with everything that they must do with respect to taking decision before moving into the industry space. Last year, I was here, I also made a presentation, but I see the kind of energy that we have last year. This year, we have increased from that pace because we are now beginning to unlearn most of the things we were having before. Now we now know that the energy sector is not, no one is going to give you free lunch. It is very, very important that we have to understand that everything within the industrial space is a very, very critical situation. The financial, the DFIs, commercial banks, those who, of course, are going to be the operators, we take everything they're going to do very, very serious. So because of this, the environment that we're going to operate in are taken into consideration as well. Health and safety of our workers are critical. We also look at what perhaps are the barriers that we will look at when we are operating in an offshore location. Time of delivering is critical. If you take someone who, of course, is a greenhorn, a rookie, to a platform, and you have a vessel that you must pay for, per day vessel can run to maybe between $1 to $2 million per day. And you wouldn't want to, your investor, your financial partner, to start charging you because of someone that you are trying to train. So it becomes very necessary. You take time to build your human capacity before moving into that space. So having talked about that, I will now come to the opportunities that are in it. Because in all of these, we have to look at opportunities. The opportunities that perhaps we see as PETA member, Petroleum Technology Association of Nigeria, Octan, and of course, Solewant coming into this space. We've been in the business for the past 26 years. Now, there are areas we must learn. Time is very critical. You must understand that if the experience is there, you develop it, then you move to another level. So there are pipes that must connect this product from one location to the other. Where are these pipes going to come from? What's going to be the value retention of Namibia in that space? Are we going to be supplying HSC material, hand gloves, hard hats, or anything that anybody can just provide? Or we are going to be looking at how to look at infrastructure that must be built. We talked about fabrication shop. What are the things that we require to build those fabrication workshops? What are the things that we must do to ensure that apart from the infrastructure that we are looking at, we also look at the SMEs? Because the industry, when we're talking about banks financing those who, of course, are going to work as vendors. For instance, in one of our plants, we have close to 150 vendors, and you have to pre-qualify them. So they need to take time to put their documents together, certify them, and all of that. Then talk about the human capital like I talked about. They need to be certified. We're not going to take maybe African certification as anything that will just take the person to the platform. So they need to be trained.
Thank you, Salomon.
So these are the things that perhaps are opportunities for Namibians that we are seeing that is an experience we have gotten over time. We also will need to share with the companies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Selma, independence often creates value, not by carrying an opportunity alone from acreage to first production, but by changing the ownership and capital structure as risk is reduced. What makes a farm-in or farm-down genuinely work in a frontier basin?
It would definitely have to be a shared sense of ownership of the risk. It comes from two, companies understanding that frontier exploration is risky, but one company's capability is obviously very different to another, and one will draw from the strategic partnerships that the other company has compared to the other. But it also really depends on the regime in which they are working, because one company's capability in one jurisdiction could be very different to another one. And quite frankly, the role of the policies in that particular jurisdiction also matter. Because independents obviously have their own frameworks in which they work, but if they are sort of handcuffed in their application, that also becomes obviously very difficult. In Eco-Atlantic's case, we've really leaned on creating strong partnerships with government at the very onset, before we were able to build a sort of capital valuable project to sell to our partners. It's about communicating our intention in terms of local capacity building. It's built on creating synergies with other operators and one would say fringe benefits when it comes to local content. It really is creating a presence in the country before a merge actually happens. It gives you what I would call sort of social capital and rapport with the government. And that is, I guess, also what Eco-Atlantic's main modus operandi has been, is to establish themselves technically, professionally, together with governments before including a bigger partner that could invest in those particular projects that they have. So in our experience, it has been a balance between the kind of relationships that the independent create in the country and how they use those relationships to build on a shared intention and shared risk.
Thanks, and I would love to get back to that, but time is against us. So I'll go to Angelique, and I'll put that question I put to you earlier in a different way. If Namibia wants an ecosystem that can attract both majors and smaller agile investors, as well as Namibians, what must the state provide in terms of data, access to acreage, predictable approvals? What must the state provide to make it so that somebody can get a reasonable, expected reasonable rate of return?
Yeah, so I want to nearly make it a two-part answer and a nice and short one for you. So from a local perspective, there is naturally quite a lot that, for me, this is much more of a local capability than a local content journey. But meaning, what does the state provide? I think there's two sides of the coin. You're talking about certainty, again, to Salma's point earlier. Investors and financiers look for certainty. We can put the price on risk, but we can't finance uncertainty. And the government and the state need to provide that, not only to the investors, but to the financiers that they are expecting to create the enablement of this local ecosystem. So it really is all about what I mentioned earlier. It's about stability, certainty, predictability, transparent systems and rules and regulations. So if you understand the rules of the game, then you know how to play in them. Whether you like them or not, you can still structure around them and also decide whether you stay or you go. In return for creating that clarity and certainty and predictability and transparency on a government side, they can then expect the investment. They can expect the skills transfer. They can expect companies in Namibia and local Namibians becoming bankable, scalable, and globally competitive. And that ultimately will create a Namibia that looks very different from today, because we create a sustainable skill set which creates an economy that can outlive the oil and gas by many years.
Very good. Let me just get to Abu Bakr. Gas is not yet a market in Namibia. Gas changes the commercial equation because finding it is the same as having a market for it. We know that. Yeah? How should frontier investors think about gas differently? And how might gas and renewables be developed, as Namibia is doing, as complementary rather than automatically competing propositions?
Thank you very much, Paul. Very interesting question. I wish we have a longer time, but I will try to be very brief in this. You see, the approach that I see new entrant or independent should be able to approach gas market is not to look at it as a molecule, but to look at it as an energy, to look at that aspect of energy that you eventually get as a final energy need. And what I mean here is, it's not talking about gas or renewables, but integration of wherever the opportunity arises, complementing each other, being able to have an integrated system that works to provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy. And for you to do that, you just have to remember, Paul, where we are. We are in Africa. This is a region with still high level of energy poverty, 600 million people without access to electricity, 900 million people suffering from lack of clean cooking. So the models and the technologies you have to deploy here may differ from others applied in the world. And I give you a very quick examples. Some of the typical, easy to go through scalable solutions are there. For example, the floating LNGs. For example, they are small scale, that you can quickly be able to get gas to market. But obviously, it has to start with some sort of kind of business models which will be able to get the market going. But the good part of it is Africa is doing that already. As we speak, nearly 15% of all floating LNG globally are in Africa. What happened in Senegal, Mauritania, in Congo, and Nigeria, UTM are good examples. So saying that independents do have the opportunity to integrate energy, shouldn't see energy as just a molecule, but integration of those molecules and electrons, see where it is better to get electricity generated, where to make sure you get fertilizer, petrochemicals, such that you are able to provide the affordable and reliable energy for much needed people that lack that energy access. And those business models should be able to support people, create jobs, enhance their skills, and provide a much more stronger capacity building and local content.
Thank you very much. We're short on time. I'm seeing my screen flashing. But we talk a lot about local content, local participation, locals getting more involved in more complex parts of the chain. In oil and gas business around the world, as in Nigeria, the majors come in, then they will give to large independents, and then eventually local independents take the place. So around the panel, I'll ask for quick answers, 30 seconds. If Namibia wants to build a sustainable ecosystem of independents and new entrants who are indigenous over the next few years, what is the single most important thing Namibia should get right? And I'm thinking this is early planning for a long-term outcome. What's the single thing Namibia should get right? Who wants to start? You want to start, Abubakar?
Okay, Paul, I will try to be very brief in this. You see, the best and easiest shortcut to this is having energy planning in terms of if it is gas, you need to have a gas master plan that will be able to see from the basins down to the burner tip. How do you connect the gas to make sure that it's integrated? We have seen a lot of countries that have challenges. They produce the gas, but the gas didn't get to market. Why? Because it's expensive. Why? Because the pipelines are not working. Why? Because the LNG is not ready. So we must make sure that that comprehensive master plan is able to provide that, and I'm sure energy planning should be an important starting point for Namibia particularly.
Thank you, Abubakar. Angelique, your thoughts?
I'm going to go back to certainty, clarity, and predictability. Honestly, to me, if Namibia can get that right, if Namibia can bring predictability on all the levels we've mentioned before, capital will follow.
Thank you. Selma?
Without risking repeating what my panelists have already said, I think for me it would be early, intentional local capability. But what is important is the way in which it is sequenced. Perhaps in the early stages we focus on training and local services, and then of course the more advanced capabilities, including local participation in terms of investment and sort of engineering, operational roles could grow as the industry grows. But I think early intervention, early participation, and creating sort of opportunities for locals at that scale, at the early stage, would benefit us when the time is right. And the sequence of those opportunities is important, not putting the cart before the horse.
Thank you. Solomon, you have the last say.
Thank you very much. I would like to end with what I started with, which is happiness, and how would the Namibian people be happy. So people is very critical. People, for me, is important in this conversation. So we have to look at the Namibian people, and if they are not going to participate in any of this discovering of the oil that we talk about fully, then that is not what going into, because the natural resource that God has given was given for the purpose of that happiness. Discovering of the oil is here. Now we have to translate it to revenue. Revenue, of course, must generate infrastructure, wealth. Then we have to talk about sustainability of this wealth. Then when this is sustained, an average Namibian will be happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have you got time for questions and answers on the floor?
Unfortunately not. We have reached our time limit. Thank you so much, Tony, our moderator, and to our distinguished panelists for another enriching discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a round of applause. I would now like to invite Jason back to the stage to kindly hand over a token of appreciation to our panelists and our moderator, as well as a group photo. If our photographer can take his position or her position, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, as our panelists and moderator have the group photo taken, and whilst Jason hands over the gifts, we have come to the end of today's official program. However, I would like to call our last speaker, and we promise we won't keep you much longer, and that is just to give us a closing summary of today's program. Please welcome to the podium member of the Namibia Board of Directors and resident representative South Africa, Hans-George Böhler from Hans Seidel Foundation. Let's give him a round of applause.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, partners and friends, Honorable Minister of Justice and Labor. It's been a fascinating 2 days. It's been also a long day, and it's also late. So, as many of you would know, and I see most of the colleagues here are, I think, now all from Namibia. Many others have left, but those who are not from here, Namibia is not only producing energy coming out of her soil and from the sun and from the water, but they also produce an energy booster called beer. Yeah, it's being produced and named after the city that conference takes place. I'm looking forward having a beer with you in a minute, so just bear with me. Yeah, it's the second day of the Namibian Oil and Gas Conference. I was asked not simply to summarize what we have heard today, but to place our discussion in a broader perspective. And I believe what became very clear, the fundamental question before us is no longer only whether Namibia has significant energy resources. Honorable Minister, you made that very clear. The more important question is how can Namibia turn these resources into lasting value for its people? And today's discussions have shown us just how many dimensions this question has. These discussions point towards one central conclusion. Discovering resources is only the beginning. The real challenge and the huge, huge opportunity is to connect those resources to the wider Namibian economy. The Vice President this morning outlined an important and hopeful vision. It means creating opportunities for Namibian businesses. It means developing skills and creating jobs. It means building infrastructure and strengthen local supply chains. And it means ensuring that investment contributes to broader economic development. This directly reflects also the objectives upon which this conference was founded. The Namibian Oil and Gas Conference, Jason, I think you are still with us, as far as I understand it, never intended to be simply an industry gathering. It brings together government, business, civil society, academia, and a wider public to discuss both the opportunities and how to mitigate the risk associated with developing an oil and gas industry, on energy future in general. And colleagues, this brings us to another important message from today. Local content must ultimately become local capacity. I believe the CEO from Rhino Resources called it local uplifting. Also, very important, it's not enough probably to define local participation in regulations and percentages, as practically explained by the second panel today. Namibian businesses must be able to compete for contracts, entrepreneurs and SMEs need access to finance, young Namibians need qualifications demanded by this industry. There was, I believe, general agreement. Developing local content is not a sprint. It's more like a marathon. Jason, you spoke about the bamboo lessons this morning. Geez, that's a long time ago this morning, yeah? I think it's 7:30. Funds gained should, and that has been also outlined, be reinvested into long-term capacity building strategy to train local workforce, to buy equipment, and to establish a collaborated approach to build capacity to do the big things and not many small things in the future. There is, however, an even broader perspective that I believe deserves recognition. What we are witnessing in Namibia today is quite remarkable. I come from South Africa. When we talk about hydrogen, now we talk about oil, every time Namibia is mentioned in South Africa. So obviously, Namibia is increasingly positioning itself not simply as a future oil and gas producer, but as an energy location of the future. Dr. Philip Mashabila made in his keynote also this morning a very important point. The oil and gas potential should not be seen as contradictions to other energy sources, such as solar, hydrogen, or hydropower. He argued that they can be understood as different components of a broader Namibian energy strategy. The impressive part is that Namibia has the possibility to think about these elements together and is positioning itself as a significant energy hub in Southern Africa. All this requires, of course, sound decisions. And this brings me to the role of the Hans Seidel Foundation, Jason, and why a German organization is involved in this conference as partner institution. The Hans Seidel Foundation is not an oil company. We are not an investor in Namibia's petroleum sector, and we have no commercial interest in particular oil, gas, or renewable projects. Our interest is a different one. For almost 5 decades, the Hans Seidel Foundation has worked very closely with the Namibian partner organizations on good governance and sustainable economic development. A central element of our work has always been to create platforms where governments, politics, business, academia, and civil society can discuss fundamental questions of the future. Energy has become precisely such a question. By the way, not only in Namibia, also in my home country, Germany. Resources, and the panel discussions made this very clear, resources alone do not guarantee development. Minister of Justice and Labor is still with us. You said institutions matter. You said transparency, legislation, legal framework, and the rule of law matter. And that has been, I think, quite clearly outlined by you. And maybe you allow me to add dialogue between government, business, and society matters as well. This is also why we support this conference, and this partnership began not yesterday. Our cooperation with the Economic Association of Namibia has developed over many years through economic policy dialogue, through platforms that bring together different sectors. For the Hans Seidel Foundation, this is therefore also an appropriate moment to express our sincere gratitude to EAN for our long-standing and trusted cooperation. So thank you, EAN. Thank you, Jason Kasutu, Cons in absence, I believe, and to the Namibian Investment Promotion and Development Board as well. We really look forward to continuing that cooperation. I'll come to the end, ladies and gentlemen. Can a young Namibian acquire the skills to participate in these new industries? Who are the best partners to achieve this? Can Namibia use its resources to industrialize, diversify its economy, and create sustainable employment. And can all of this be achieved within strong institutions that ensure transparency, accountability, and responsible resource management? These are very difficult questions for any country in the world. But Namibia is in the fortunate position of being able to ask them before large-scale production begins. And as many of today's, I have to say, really brilliant, fantastic speakers made also clear, Namibia is able to find the right answers. That is an opportunity. Opportunity, I learned today, must be met by preparedness. And that is precisely why platforms such as this conference matter, Jason. And ultimately, these choices belong to Namibia. Our role as partners is to contribute experience, facilitate dialogue, and support Namibia in turning those choices into lasting opportunities for its people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Mr. Hans-George Böhler. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude day one of the Namibia Oil and Gas Conference and Exhibition 2026, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to every speaker, every panelist, every sponsor, every exhibitor, every delegate, and every member of the organizing committee whose contribution has made today such a huge success. Just before we adjourn, I would like to call back Jason one last time, and this is to do a special handover. They say save the best for last. This is to facilitate a special handover to our lovely Honourable Minister, as well as Mr. Böhler, to please join us back on stage. The minister knows that it's going to the media, it's going to print, it's going online, so he's making sure that he looks all dapper. Whilst we have the picture taken, yes, let's give them a round of applause. Once again, thanks to our host, the Economic Association of Namibia, together with the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, the Hans Seidel Foundation, our strategic partners, NAMCOR, SNC Incorporated, Rhino Resources, and every sponsor supporting this remarkable gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, our program will start promptly 9 o'clock. We kindly request that you take your seats by 8:45. I could actually make it earlier. Maybe I should say 7 o'clock. Then we know you'll be here at 8. We'll start promptly at 9 tomorrow morning. We now invite you to join us for the Braai and Networking Reception, proudly sponsored by Copia Group. And I heard a little bird whisper in my ear that the CEO of Copia Group, he actually got married last weekend. So he's a newly wedded husband, and you maybe want to take the opportunity and wish him well. For a divorcee like myself, and I don't want to be negative, I would have said, welcome to Frankenstein's Club of Horrors. But I'm not going to be that person today. I'll leave it to you to congratulate him, and please join him at the Braai this evening. So please do enjoy the evening, enjoy the rest of the networking, and we look forward to welcoming you tomorrow morning, bright and early, for another great session of the Namibia Oil and Gas Conference and Exhibition 2026. From myself, your host, Rochelle Locke, have a good evening.